Every segment we have an unbelievable section where we highlight something that we find to just be rather unbelievable. So this month it is the charter schools lawsuit, which now moves on to the Court of Appeals, claiming that they deserve to have more money than they're already receiving. And we will give them this. Schools in Arizona definitely deserve more money than they are receiving. But the charter schools claim in their lawsuit that they are being gypped, that they are not receiving the exact same amount as neighborhood district schools, and that they should be brought up to the exact same level. Well, there are a lot of misleading points in their lawsuit, and they've already lost at the lower court level, which is really no surprise. I think eventually they're going to lose this lawsuit, but it's interesting to hear their arguments, and here's how the arguments go. Basically, they tally all of the expenses that neighborhood schools have. So expenses for transportation, for food services, for children who have special needs, in addition to all of the other things that neighborhood public schools must provide by law. They tally those into a number, and then they say, see, neighborhood schools receive this amount, and then they tally their numbers up, and they say we receive less than the neighborhood schools receive, therefore we are receiving less money from the state and we should be made whole. What they don't tell people is that the things that the neighborhood schools provide are things that most charter schools do not provide. They do not provide, most of them, lunches or breakfast for children who are needy. Most of them do not provide transportation. Many of them do not educate children with special needs. And yet they claim that even though they don't provide those services, they should be given money as if they did. Fairly unbelievable, don't you think? But this case is moving forward in the courts, and unfortunately, a lot of people believe what the charter school administrators tell them. So parents are told, we don't receive as much money from the state as the neighborhood schools do, so you need to give us some of your money. So this is also used as a fundraising scheme by the charter schools to encourage their parents to actually dole out thousands of dollars of private money to give to the charter school operators. And remember, there's not a lot of transparency about how charter school funding is actually spent. So that money from the state, from private donors that does go to charter schools, we don't always get to see exactly how much they receive or how they spend it, because again, they are not held to the same standards, the same rules, the same laws as neighborhood public schools. So once again, this is in the news. I don't think that it gets to the level of detail that it should, and I think, unfortunately, while they may not win their lawsuit, what they are doing is helping perpetuate this idea that somehow they are underfunded or not funded at adequate levels on par with the neighborhood schools. Now, another way that you debunk what they say is to take a look at the neighborhood schools that are converting to charter schools. And a number of them are doing this now. Why? Because they get more money. So charter schools actually, if you tally everything up, get more money than neighborhood schools. And that's why some neighborhood schools are converting to charters, because the state funding levels have been kept at such ridiculously low levels. They are doing whatever they can to try and still provide the services that they need to provide to their children. But that just continues to, belie this myth out there that charter schools are not receiving as much money. They are in fact receiving more money and providing, actually, in many cases, fewer services.
Yeah, you're right. It's unbelievable, and there's so much to unpack in this story. But there's one thing I want to point out. I was watching charter schools. They were talking about many of the virtues of charter over the schools with school districts. And one is, we can do it so much cheaper than they can. I mean, how easy is this? We won't have the administration, and we won't have all that baggage. We won't have all those unions pounding at us all the time. We can do better for a fraction of the amount of money. And now, of course, they're crying poor, saying, you haven't given us as much as the other people. It's not fair. While, in fact, as you say, it's fair and possibly in some ways a little bit more than fair.
Right, and I think their arguments are just absolutely disingenuous, and so it's frustrating to see them, making these arguments, especially in a legal setting. I mean, I wish there was some penalty for, frankly, doing that. But what you're talking about, they did come forward in the beginning and say we can do it cheaper. This is one of the great advantages, allegedly, to charter schools. But they will now deny that they ever said that. So when you bring up that argument, they now deny that that was one of the arguments that they made when they came forward and said, please let us start setting up charter schools.
Doesn't take much to figure that out, to find that. Now, one group of charter schools up in Phoenix that people don't know that much about down here, because it's not down here, similar to Basis in some way, is Great Hearts Schools. And Great Hearts Schools, if you go on their website, they'll say literally, we can't teach the kids the way we want to teach them on the amount of money that we're given by the state. So please, everybody give $1,500 per child. So if you have 2 kids there, $3,000. If you have 3 kids there, $4,500 per year to help us with this. And while they can't force people to do it, they do have a wall of fame and a wall of shame for people who do and don't. And Great Hearts also has people buy supplemental texts, and they have people buy uniforms and all kinds of extra fees that are built in that make it either difficult or uncomfortable for people who don't have that money, and also show that what they've always complained about, oh, these schools are wasting money, oh, they've got money coming out of their ears and they pretend that they don't have it. In fact, it's not true. And charter schools are almost proving the lie of the state legislature that says, the Republicans in the state legislature, who says there's plenty of money for schools.
Right. The other thing that's interesting about charter schools is that they also receive, because they're such darlings right now of the private foundation world, they receive a lot of private money as well from foundations and from individuals. Let's not forget that the Basis school system right now is in the middle of receiving a $300,000. Well, $300,000 is coming from Craig Barrett. Another $300,000 is coming from another one of their wealthier board members. And so, if you factor in all of the extra dollars that actually come in, I think charter schools are doing quite well. In fact, they pay their administrative costs are double the costs of neighborhood schools. And so, while all schools in Arizona definitely are not at adequate funding levels, and I will say that for charter schools as well, they are not at adequate funding levels. However, for charters to go after, they want $135 million more is what they're claiming in this lawsuit. The other thing I find interesting about this lawsuit is that they claim that neighborhood schools, when they put a measure out for a bond or an override, should be sharing those dollars with the charter schools, presumably, I guess, within their boundary zone. Well, the problem with that is bond money goes for typically capital construction, so either building construction or when you're actually adding something physical to your operation. Well, what's the problem with that and charter schools? The problem is if a charter school folds, they are able to keep the owners, the private owners, are able under Arizona law to keep the building and keep any things that have been bought with our state tax dollars, computers, furniture, anything in that building. So now the charters in this lawsuit claim that we should even expand their access to more taxpayer dollars, more bond money to come to them that they can hold on to if they decide to shut down their charter? I don't think so.
This is one of those stories where you just keep on pulling more things out of the box, and I want to pull out one more thing to finish it up, and this is kind of a sideline, but you mentioned earlier that they don't offer transportation often, they don't offer free lunch often. Well, if you have kids who live far away, whose parents can't transport them, they can't go to that charter school, but they can go to district schools any place in the district. If you have kids whose parents can't afford good lunches, they're not going to go to those schools. And so there's a selectivity built into the charter schools because they don't offer the services to the parents and to the children that the district schools do. And consequently, the district has more of these kids. It makes the charter schools a little bit easier to maintain. They have fewer of the low-income kids, and it creates an uneven playing field, which is one of the real concerns about charters, that they're creating kind of a new student segregation. So that's built in there too. It's a huge story, and I do wish the media would learn more about these various aspects of it than they know.
I